Benjamin Day.
And I am Jillian Mason.
And this is Medicare for All, the podcast for everybody who needs healthcare, human or pet. Because the topic of our episode today is, I'm very, very excited for this, is Peticare for All. That's not pedicures for all, that's Peticare for all. And any regular listeners of the podcast will not be surprised to hear that Gen Xers and Millennials are going into debt for healthcare. But what if we told you that this time it's for their pets? More Americans are spending more money on healthcare for their beloved pets, which means, of course, private insurance companies are getting in on the action and trying to cash in on it. And today we will be digging into the wild world of pet insurance and what Peticare for All could mean for our four-legged friends or our zero-legged friends or our more than four-legged friends. I'm sure you see them all. Chris. So do you want to introduce our guest today, Jillian?
Oh, of course I do. So we have here Chris Dupuis, who is a vet and also the owner of Wheatland Animal Hospital in a very pleasant sounding place, Naperville, Illinois. Thank you so much for being with us, Chris.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
We also have some really important guests for today. And honestly, I'd be lying if I said that the entire point of this podcast episode wasn't to get our pets on air. But so I wanted to just take a second to introduce Coretta Scott Cat, social justice kitty.
Hi, Coretta.
If she
Coretta sits in on all of our staff meetings.
She does sit in on all of our staff meetings. Coretta is uninsured and living in Corpus Christi, Texas.
That's a dangerous place.
And then, Ben, did you want to introduce someone?
I do. This is Coda. My dog is not pick-upable, so I'm going to have to do some camera magic here, but he's curled up in a ball, napping on the guest bed across from me. So...
where he is frequently. These are our office managers.
Exactly.
All right.
So
that's enough looking at cute pets. Let's get into it. So I wanted to just start off by Chris asking you a little bit more about, why you decided to become a vet, and if you could just tell us a little bit about Wheatland Animal Hospital.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So actually, my dad started the clinic 32 years ago. So my dad was a practicing vet for years.
Oh.
So I always knew I loved animals. I grew up with cats and I loved them. So I always knew I wanted to work with them. So yeah, pretty typical story. Our clinic is, we see dogs and cats. Used to do a bunch of wildlife work, but the guy that did the wildlife moved down to Florida. So dogs and cats right now. And yeah, we see mostly, families that bring their dogs and cats into us.
Awesome.
So no zero-legged friends for you.
We have no zero-legged friends.
No
sometimes we have three-legged friends, but mostly four-legged friends.
Yeah.
So yeah, they all got legs though.
All right. No, go ahead, Jillian. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say some more about legs, but I think that's fine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've obviously been in the business of, keeping pets healthy for a while now. Can you start off talking a little bit about, are there any trends that you're kind of seeing in terms of just how widespread pet ownership is, how much pet owners are willing to spend, just like their attitudes towards pets in general? Is that changing?
For sure. We have a lot of clients from previous years that are they're really, really wonderful, but it is true that some of the younger people are a bit more willing to spend discretionary income on the pets. It sounds like based on your survey, some are willing to go into debt on the pets. We saw a little bit of an uptick during COVID of pets coming in our doors here. So yeah, there does seem to be a bit more willingness to spend, not just on medical care, but on just the cost of the animal themselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am really interested in the generational aspect of this, right? So I started doing some research and I found out that, so first of all, 47% of pet owners overall, right, have gone into debt for their pets, which is kind of a wild statistic. And then it turns out, right, that this is actually highly generational, and that baby boomers are actually less likely to go into debt for their pets than Gen Xers and millennials. And Gen Xers are by far the people who are willing to go into debt for their pet, the most willing to go into debt for their pets, with 66% of Gen Xers in debt for their pets. So here's my real question. Why do boomers hate pets so much?
They don't hate pets, Jillian. However, one of the issues, I won't get too long-winded here, but veterinary costs have gone up. It's a profession that was highly underpaid. Primarily technicians have been underpaid for years. So costs were just much lower per service years ago. And I do think some boomers are getting a little frustrated as costs rise to really match the quality of what we're doing. But they just 30 years ago, they weren't used to paying what they are expected to pay now.
Oh, wow. It's a little like college tuition then. Yeah.
It sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? Yeah. But to be honest, I think some vets sometimes get frustrated with some of their older clientele, but they forget that, I didn't pay for animals in the 80s when an exam costed $8. My dad's exam charge was $8 in the late 80s. It's not $8 anymore, so
It could also be that boomers are just much better with their money too, and
they may have made money in the 80s,
right?
Market too.
Yeah.
But it's all those factors, I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
So on this, you really, of course, pets is a bit of a departure for us on the Medicare for All podcast. We spent a lot of time kind of unearthing and advertising the bad deeds of human health insurance companies, and healthcare providers like hospitals, doctors get a pretty front row seat to that. So what has your experience been just with pet insurance, and how does it differ from like the health insurance that you or I might have?
Yeah, so the differences are very clear and simple. Like, it's third party. So like, it doesn't work through us. Basically, the client buys a policy if they'd like, and they pay us in full, and then we submit a diagnosis, and then the insurance company just gives a chunk of money back to the client. So it's pretty straightforward. The concept is nice to a lot of people. The practice can be confusing. A lot of people end up buying policies. They're not quite sure what they're getting for it. Right. So that's one of the problems we have.
That actually reminds me a little bit of Medicare Advantage, right?
Right. Could we just ask people for their stories about the privatized Medicare plan?
Those stories. But I mean, just like the idea that so sometimes Medicare Advantage plans are the cheapest plans that are available, right? And so people get sold on the idea of like, here's a plan or whatever. But the truth is it actually covers nothing. And so it's, you're basically you're basically paying a lot of money for insurance that actually isn't reducing your healthcare costs. Yeah.
Right. And
what would you guess, what share of your clients do you think has pet insurance? Is it low or is it?
Yeah, it's low. It's like less than 5%. And there's a lot of statistics that get altered to make that sound higher. There's studies that are based on whether someone took a free trial or not. Okay. People that actually pay. Yeah. So if you've heard like some 42% of British people get pet insurance, that isn't true at all.
Oh, really?
It's a pretty low number. It's probably under 5%. And again, a lot of it is due to confusion. Like they're not clear to understand policies in some cases. So people just don't choose them because they're confused. Some of the insurance companies have done actually a pretty good job getting a lot more simple and straightforward with their payouts. Like, for example, like they don't cover the exam fee, but they'll pay like 90% of diagnostics, medications, and hospitalization. So those are helping people make more informed decisions.
And is it common for them to have things about the not covering pre-existing conditions, which used to be a human insurance thing too, until the Affordable Care Act? I mean, just kind of making exclusions.
Every single animal policy excludes pre-existing conditions, and a lot of them exclude common conditions. Like, for example, a bulldog is likely to get hip dysplasia, so they'll have a list of exclusions based on breed. So but every single policy has a pre-existing condition, and they're a little different. I mean, some of them they'll march the records back 2 years to see if there's any evidence within 2 years of buying a policy. Some of them will go back a couple months or so. And again, that kind of creates confusion because no one really knows if my dog got a urinary tract infection 2 years ago, is that a one-off or is that going to be a ding for the future? And there's a lot of confusion with that.
Yeah.
So you must hear from a lot of patients who are dealing with pet insurance and who are, kind of like weighing a lot of options in terms of their care. How do you see that kind of showing up in your work? in general?
Yeah, I mean, people always ask us about it. I mean, they want to know if it's something they should do, and unfortunately, a lot of veterinarians are undereducated in the policies ourselves. There's 36 or so companies that offer them. They're all very different. And at the end of the day, a lot of it's subject to underwriting and decision making that we can't predict. So we sort of need to help direct it. But to be quite honest with you, that sometimes there's enough confusion that it's hard for veterinary staff to know what to suggest.
Yeah.
I've every time I do have pet insurance for my dog, and whenever I submit a claim, you probably generate the invoices that have a line for each thing,
Right.
which the hours and the material is used and all that, and you can tell the insurance just kind of goes to work with a red marker. It's like everyone is like a not allowed charge, or we only reimburse up to a maximum of this amount for this service, which it's never enough to actually cover the vet bill for the most part.
Yeah.
So it really feels completely different to me than the health insurance side.
Yeah, and again, I mean, and there are a couple of companies that have understood that frustration and decided to just make simple, very straight like percentage payouts, but they also have way higher premiums too.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get you at one end or the other, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what about, do you see clients who, do not have pet insurance, or I guess whether they do or they not, who kind of struggle with being able to afford care for their pets?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. What kind of decisions do you see people making on a regular basis based on cost of healthcare for pets?
Well, a lot of them, I guess to answer that in the best way I probably can, you have a few people that seem unable to be able to afford pretty basic things. And that sort of gets us into the whole dilemma of, is having an animal a luxury or is it a right? But we certainly have people, typical really extreme things, broken legs, multiple day hospitalizations. I mean, those can be multiple thousands of dollars. So there are a fair amount of people that weren't expecting that when they got the animal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I know I ended up paying, I think it was like $1,500 to, remove a hairball in my cat's stomach or something like that.
Yeah.
And I just remember like sitting outside the vet, and because it was during COVID, right, when you couldn't come in with the vet or whatever. So just like sitting in the parking lot weeping, trying to like put together money to make sure that Coretta could, get that hairball out or whatever. But the costs are just wild. And they seem to be really variable from place to place throughout the country.
Yeah, they are. And, veterinarians have been, in our pretty strong opinion, underpaid for years, and our technicians are extremely underpaid. So it's a profession with high overhead, high labor costs, high risk, high danger, high everything. And the old sort of paradigm was that, well, the vets should take care of these things, or they don't love animals if they don't do this or this or this. And it's the exact opposite is true. Like vets commit suicide at a really high rate. Technicians quit the job at a really high rate because they grind and put themselves at risk. So the costs are high because the talent and the time and the risk is high. It just wasn't very well conveyed in the past, and so now we got to address the fact that clients still have to pay for that, and that's where that's where this conversation goes to,
So it has a lot to do with like the kind of the business of veterinary care, right? Like the way it's set up, that this kind of the cost structure and everything. Right? Like I really appreciate what you were saying about like vets in particular being underpaid. I was working on student debt for a long time, and we used to say that we were going to do a vet campaign because we found that veterans and veterinarians actually had the highest proportions of student debt. And you were saying, and how many years did you go to school to be a vet?
So it's 4 years. I'll tell you a quick funny story, and this gets back to student debt. Our student debts are enormous, and we have to pay that. When I was actually in undergrad, getting ready to go to vet school, I was at my best friend's house, and his mom candidly asked me. She looked me right in the eye. She's like, "So is vet school 1 semester or 2 semesters?" It's 8 semesters, and I have to pay for all
certificate program. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people that see their vet prices are not appreciating the fact that we're in school for 4 years, not only not making any money, but paying $50,000+ a year. That debt is a major part of why animals cost X amount of dollars.
And without having to, disclose the pay of your employees, on average nationally, what would a vet tech potentially earn?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it obviously depends on skill levels and experience, all that kind of stuff. But your average vet tech is probably making between $15 and $24 an hour. And again, this is a job where they have a degree. They put their bodies at risk. They put their emotion at risk. They deal with big challenges with clients. I mean, it is a high skill, high labor, high risk job, and you just can't keep people at that kind of a rate. It just isn't good enough for what they do.
The emotional piece of it seems to be really pretty devastating on vets then, yeah?
The veterinary suicide rate is 4 times the national average. And
Jesus.
There's not statistics on veterinary technicians, but it's high, and a lot of them leave the profession. So so one of the reasons vet care costs a fair amount is because we're finally addressing the fact that if we don't take care of our staff, we're not going to be able to do anything for animals.
Yeah.
And so that must be a tough kind of ethical dilemma if you have pets who need care, but their owners can't afford to pay it.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you have this understaffing, challenge and underpayment payment of workers. So
if we don't have staff, then we can't do anything that people want us to do. Like we're useless without staff. So and I have a little story from just today. I had a really nice man, veteran, senior. The first thing he told me, he's like, I don't have a lot of money. I can't afford a lot of expensive stuff. And thankfully that our bills were lower than some of the specialists he'd be seeing. But, I'm sitting there wanting to give this guy a free exam because he was being sincere with me. But I also got a technician sitting right next to me who doesn't make enough money. We deal with that dilemma happens 5 times a day.
Yeah. So it sounds like any shortcomings that we have in our broader system of caring for pets they're not going to be solved on the business by business level, right? We're going to have to.
It's hard to expect it to be so. And you guys said before, like there seems to be a variation in charges. In my opinion, the variation is almost unacceptable. I mean, there are some clinics that will charge 5 or 10 times more for a similar service than another clinic will. My personal opinion is the corporate nature of some clinics does add to that. But that's the problem when you're paying when similar services are that wildly differing in price.
Yeah, Coda needs a leg surgery in the next couple of weeks, and we got 2 quotes from 2 animal hospital, one animal hospital and one kind of surgical specialist group here. Yeah. And one was around 4,000 and one was around 8,000 for the same procedure. So what you're saying is absolutely true.
It's frustrating for an owner because you're trying not to price shop, but at the end of the day, you sort of have to,
Yeah,
I wouldn't have until I saw the 8,000. I was like, I guess I have to price shop. And I just asked my primary vet for advice, and he suggested I check out this other place.
Though it totally makes sense though, because the particular clinic where Ben got the $8,000 estimate is the same clinic where I got a like $1,300 estimate for taking a tooth out of Coretta, like removing a tooth. And then I moved to Texas, and I ended up paying $300 to have that.
Yeah, but again, a lot of it is based on care too. And I'm not saying good or bad about individuals, but I mean, some people perform things at way higher standard of care. So when the standards of care are way different, then the price should be different. But a lot of times you'll have pretty similar services that do have wildly different price tags, and that's when it can be a little frustrating.
Yeah.
So thinking about a different world of how we pay for and I guess give access to pet healthcare. I mean, I had read that Sweden has some like insane percentage of pets have health insurance. It sounded like you you said some of the, at least for England, some of those stats might be bogus.
Yeah, the stats are not real. No.
Okay. All right.
It's based on people taking free trials of a product, so that's not real purchasing of insurance.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right.
So, I don't know. I think in Europe it's slightly more popular than the U.S., but not tremendously more so.
Mm-hmm.
Right, for the same reason it is in the U.S. It's there's confusion, and it's a for-profit business. So like the average client will spend more in premiums than they get back in benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were in like an ideal world, we work in Medicare for all, so ideal worlds are what we like to imagine. If we were in an ideal world, like how would you imagine veterinary care happening and being paid for?
Well, yeah, so that's a loaded question because it's hard. I mean, I think I think at the end of the day, like we fully are aware of the fact that even if we believe that veterinary that having an animal isn't a luxury and it's if not a right, at least something that we know is emotionally beneficial for people. Right. There somehow has to be a way to separate costs of someone who's needy, who needs financial support based on someone who isn't. I mean, I don't think in a world we really believe that the entirety of pet care should go to a managed system. But there certainly are a lot of people that firmly believe that a lot of people get such benefit from animals, including homeless, including veterans who probably are low on money, that there needs to be a support system for them. To be honest with you, in my world, I really think that there are some charities that have done a good job and haven't been, broadly across the country enough. But it certainly brings up the question if some sort of a, taxpayer paid thing would be part of that. And I don't know the exact answer to that question. All I know is we have a lot of people that are homeless, elderly, military, and we know those animals dramatically enhance their life quality. Right. And we commonly find ourselves unable to meet what they're looking for in veterinary care.
Wow. So pets are actually a form of healthcare, is what you're saying.
And emotional healthcare, absolutely.
Yeah. That's great. That's great.
Again, there's a lot of good stories about. I don't remember details, but there's a veterinarian out in California that's devoted the majority of his career to basically servicing homeless people and their pets, and some of the stories are pretty cool to look at.
Yeah. Terrific.
Yeah, and one of the things we were chatting about before we went live on air, I was saying, at least in the human healthcare world, there's actually a law that prevents hospitals and physicians from turning away people with an urgent medical condition. But at the same time, you need to be able to pay for that. Yeah. So there's another part of the law that pays for it. It's called what's it called? It's called it's basically reimburses hospitals for the care they provide that isn't reimbursed by either out of pocket or they call it bad debt, essentially. The bills they issue that they know they can't get back. And the hospitals that have a lot of that, especially the hospitals who are serving areas with high numbers of uninsured people, they tend to get a larger public stream. So you'd have, if we want to have so I guess I had kind of raised this question of morality of do we think it's moral to turn a pet away with an urgent medical condition? But we obviously can't disentangle that from also the financial side of it.
And in general with that, there certainly are. Most clinics will absolutely provide baseline care for people, even if they upfront declare they're not paying. Like there's baseline care that is generally. There's no set rule on it, but it's sort of part of our oath that we take care of these animals and we're the advocates for them. So yes, the baseline care is usually covered, but it is true. Sometimes you get that dilemma where the animal is perfectly treatable, but it may cost thousands of dollars. So do you eat that cost? Do you euthanize and do a humane thing, but also know you could have treated him? But of course, there's no public funding that gives veterinarians any money for the good nature service.
Right.
That's
no, absolutely.
So yeah, at this point, you know, we have this moral code, but we certainly don't have any financial backing for it.
Right.
That sounds familiar too, actually. So many Democrats who say that healthcare is a human right, We don't actually ever bother to try to entangle it out of disentangle it from that big industrial system.
Yeah.
And you had also mentioned prior to us going on the air that there's a common practice where some owners will be required to relinquish ownership of their pets.
And again, it just gets into like what the vet clinic's, you know, skew is on it. But there certainly are some situations where people will, you know, have an animal that's entirely treatable, but it costs more money than they're able to afford. And so a commonly done thing is the owner will sign the animal over to the veterinary clinic, who then pro bono goes and does the work, finds a home for it, and maybe they have like a fundraising scheme that helps them out on it. You know, it's interesting. Like, I mean, we don't do a lot of that around here. In fact, I can't remember the last time we did that, but I got colleagues that do that, and most of them actually are very positive about that. The clients are just happy that the animal was kept alive. I'm sure it's emotionally really disturbing to have to go through that kind of a scenario, you know.
It's like best worst outcome, I guess. But,
right, you know. Yeah.
And the other thing that shocked me was that apparently use of GoFundMe's is also just super prevalent for pet owners, the same way it is for humans. I mean,
very much so. Yeah, very much so.
So here's a question for you, Chris.
Yep.
Here at Healthcare Now, we believe that people who care about other people's health are actually better people. Could we also say that people who care about pets' health are better people?
100%. I mean,
yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to give you you look at these kids that like grow up with animals. I just think these kids are empathetic kids. I think it teaches them to respect life, and they're just empathetic. Absolutely.
So when we have a bunch of baby boomers who are describing pets as a luxury good and saying that millennials shouldn't buy pets they can't afford.
Yeah. Again, I mean, but here's I'll flip the script on that a little bit though. Listen, I'm an animal lover. I completely want, again, homeless and military people are two huge examples of people that I absolutely think benefit from pets. I also will see people buy the $4,000 pet store dog,
right?
Like a high risk breed too, and then all of a sudden I'm on the hook because they can't afford it. Something costs a couple $100. Like I'm a lot more sympathetic to the older lady who paid $50 for the dog at the shelter than I am for the 25-year-old that bought a $4,000 bulldog on credit, and now I'm talking about it. I mean, and I get that all the time, you know. So yeah, so the money people are putting into just the purchase in the first place, it's a huge part of the problem. You know, you guys are talking about your rescue animals, and it's a different game when you're, you know,
the for-profit pet industry.
And that again, that's a problem. Like, veterinarians are part of this industry, and of course we're for profit. But you know, when we see like pet stores and again, breeders, they can charge what they want to, but I can't tell you how oftentimes someone will pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a dog, and they can't afford a $400 treatment. And I don't quite understand why they bought that dog. So the argument that boomers may make, it's not unfounded. It's just it's too broad, though. I mean, you got to get down to it. I mean, again,
pets can be luxury goods, but they are not all luxury goods.
Yes, correct.
Get yourself a rescue pet and be a better person. I think that's what we're trying to say, right?
Fair enough. Yeah.
This would lead us way too far astray, but also just the breeding unhealthy breeds because they look cute. It just drives me crazy.
Well, you know, again,
I love those animals anyway. I mean, one of our best friends has a bulldog who's just adorable and lovable, but why would you breed an animal that can't breathe, you know? And I mean,
it gets back to like informed decisions. And again, when we look at these things where people can't afford, it's like, are we talking about someone who has money and just blew it on an animal that costs too much and they should have known what they were getting into? Or are we talking about some like rescue dog that had some bad luck happen to it? You know?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you guys. You said it right there, you know. But yeah, I mean, but in terms of like breeding, let me address the breeding the potentially unhealthy ones. There's a lot of really strong opinions on should you breed bulldogs, French bulldogs, stuff like that. And there's also breeds that are like guaranteed to tear their ACL. Like, I mean, just be pretty blunt. You buy a Mastiff, the dog is probably going to tear both ACLs in its lifetime. So is that unethical? And at the end of the day, like, we try to stay out of those ethics things because we don't think there's a black and white answer. But I do think there's a black and white answer that if you don't have money, you should not be getting those animals. You know, I mean, those should be looked at as a luxury because they cost a lot of money. You know, I don't believe that a rescue dog should be looked at as a luxury at all.
Yeah.
So in general, people should just be more conscious of like their obligations to the animals they adopt. Right?
Well, yeah, and it's our job to help inform them of what the obligations are going to be. I think as a profession, we need to step up and be better at that, not just to our clients, but reaching out to people that are prospective people. And
that's really cool. Yeah.
Well, Jillian, this is our first foray into Peticare. But I learned so much that I've never thought about. And Chris, I really appreciate especially the inside look on sort of the vet industry and all the trade-offs you guys have to make. Goodbye. Good night, Coretta. It's great to see you as always. And you too, Jillian, I guess. And I don't want to forget to thank our podcast team who made all this possible, and especially to Lindsay, who was our researcher for this episode, but also connected us with you, Chris, through an old family connection.
Yeah. Good to meet you guys.
So our podcast manager is Angelique Davis. As I just mentioned, our researcher for this episode was Lindsay Beisch. Our show notes writer was Jerry Katz, and our audio editor was Irina Budanova. So thanks so much, everyone, and get ready for the Peticare for All revolution to come.
Stay safe and stay dangerous, y'all.